What does?
The sign.
Her nameplate.
I'm losing it.
Oh, it does look teal.
That does look
Looks
teal
like
to you too, yeah. See, I haven't lost my mind yet.
Or thoroughly.
All you gotta do is talk and you come on TV.
We've got 1 minute.
You're already on TV.
Oh, that's because, you know why? It's as soon as you speak, the camera tracks you.
I spoke and nothing happened. See, nothing happens over on this side of the table.
That's because you're not speaking loud enough.
Lean into your microphone more.
Hello, hello. Ooh, it's changed. But it still won't come over here. See?
So when the
Get that fixed,
presentation
will
is
you guys?
happening, you can't look at the notes though, right? Because it's on
Okay, see, it still hasn't come over here.
The presentation is,
PowerPoint notes.
you can look at what's in your agenda package, but the camera switches to what they're previewing. So you can look at your agenda package. There's no impact on what's on the
Oops.
screen.
See, it only goes on that side. Something wrong with this. It only goes on your side.
Okay, doesn't matter.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to call this meeting to order. I am Councillor Anna Purcell. This is a Committee of the Whole meeting, and at our Committee of the Whole meetings, our acting mayor chairs, which is me. I've told my partner, Gary, that he can call me your acting worship for the month of February. He was, for some reason, less delighted by that idea than I was, but anyway. So I'll begin with our Aboriginal Acknowledgement. The City of Nelson acknowledges all Aboriginal peoples on whose traditional territories we stand. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. I believe we have no introduction of late items today, so can I have somebody adopt the agenda?
With the removal of the first delegation.
Right, so yes, adopt the agenda as amended. So the Community Energy Association, item 8A, they are unable to come today, so.
I'll move it.
Move the amended agenda.
Second.
Seconded by the mayor. All in favor? Carried, okay. So now we have the adoption of minutes of previous meetings.
Move adoption.
All right. Seconded by Councillor Adams. All in favor? Carried. And now we have our cultural presentation. Would our cultural ambassador Joy Barrett would like to, or Cultural Development Officer Joy Barrett like to come forward and introduce today's presentation?
Hello. I'm pleased today to present this group of 20 students from the grade 4-5 class at South Nelson Elementary. Now, for their Christmas concert this year, held at the Capitol Theatre, they created a radio show called A Christmas to Remember. The final segment, performed by all 55 grade 4 and 5 students, was a look back at the music world in 2017 and included a tribute to Gord Downie and Tom Petty. Today, a small portion of this group will perform Wheat Kings by the Tragically Hip and Free Falling by Tom Petty. In class, these students learn about the meaning behind the lyrics and the legacy left behind by each artist. At their concert, the audience sang along during each chorus, so please feel free to do the same. And welcome, South Nelson.
Welcome, South Nelson. And could I make one request? We are on camera today. We live stream, and I know you're all beautifully set up there. Could you come here?
The middle?
Yeah.
Towards facing that?
No, there's cameras right there. Face the audience, but come in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have one of these things, just sit in the front, so come last.
Back here, though.
Yeah, further back here.
Except the other side. Just singers go to the very back.
But you gotta be at that end.
Yep, they're coming.
Those funny little round things right there below the TV screen, those are the cameras. There. Let's go, all of us up here.
Need them all.
Hi, Jaya.
You're on TV now, boy.
The camera will see. Don't worry, the camera will get you even if you're near the front.
Oh, it's TV. Live TV.
You're on the internet.
Yep, grab a chair, yeah.
Yeah. You go to YouTube and find it. Hi, Jackson.
Oh, and quick note, this is Carmen Giffen, the musical director at South Nelson.
Hi, Carmen.
Thanks for inviting us. It's really fun. We've never sang here. We sang in lots of places, but not ever here.
Not in council chambers?
Uh,
Nice drum.
sometimes we like busking on the street. We might actually do that on the way back. We might make some songs in front of a pop show. Okay, ready? I'll start it and then I'll like.
She's blowing into it.
I don't know.
I don't either.
I don't know what it's called.
Come right here. Come right here. Yeah, sure. Come on. Don't be afraid. Come on.
That was fantastic.
Coming
Wonderful.
today. It was very good.
Thank you so much.
Have a good afternoon.
On the website.
Your drum? Is that your drum? School?
Do you have everything? Got everything? Oh.
Oh, you are. You are missing
wonder
two
where those
bars.
went.
Jackets?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Is this somebody's jacket?
Yeah, that's Kai's jacket, I think, there. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Maybe.
What a wonderful way to start a meeting. Oh yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mayor.
Oh.
Probably one or more people presenting, so there we go.
All right, so now we have come to the public participation portion of our meeting. City Council welcomes comments from the public on issues it is dealing with or on other issues of interest to the public. Before speaking, please identify yourself, stating your name and place of residence and the issue you're bringing forward. Please limit your questions and or comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Council will not make any decisions at this meeting about the issue you raise, but may refer the item to staff for follow-up. Topics raised in this session should be of broad public interest. Complaints of a personal nature will be dealt with by staff through the city's established complaint process. Does anybody wish to make a public comment? All right, please come forward. Are you kidding?
Pretty much know all you people. If you don't know me, Anna, I just put your furnace in a little while ago.
Oh, thank you.
My name is Ralph Gooden-Wilson. I live in Nelson. I am the owner of CDW Plumbing and Heating, and we're probably the largest service plumbing company in town. The issue I'd like to address is that of backflow prevention in this town, being there is no municipal bylaw, and just to make you people aware, we receive no calls whatsoever from the private sector on the testing and maintenance of backflow prevention. There is no program here. So you should be aware that there is no bylaw, there is no requirement that, say, if you have an animal hospital or a funeral home, that you put a backflow device in your premises so that in case of negative main pressure, you don't suck the guts out of a cow and put it back in the water main or the brewery or the whatever industrial process you have. So it's a matter of protection of the water supply. Most municipalities, Castlegar, Fruitvale, Trail, have adopted backflow bylaws. There's kind of a one-size-fits-all bylaw that the government puts out, which would be somewhat unsuitable for Nelson, considering the pressure surges we see in the water system and the difficulties that creates with these devices. So it has to be carefully considered. So I'm just making you aware that there's certainly an issue in the water supply. Probably become even more so if you do connect to the lake for a supplementary system, because that would give a nice drain port and a good test for all backflow situations in town. It could really make a mess of the water supply. So I am very concerned on this. I don't see why I don't receive no calls on this at all. So, and it's probably to do with there is no bylaw and there's no awareness of this issue. So that's my presentation.
Well, thank you. Council, do you have any questions?
No, I'd like to recommend that we refer this to staff,
I'm sending a note.
especially, to our manager of public works.
I talked to, Gil when he was, I talked down to maintenance people and it just sort of goes in a circle. So somehow it's been missed by previous councils, and it does have to be carefully considered because, for instance, I can get into the specifics, but it would probably go over your heads. But there does need to be some action on this front if you are looking at water meters and all these other things that combines with that issue as well.
Right. Well, thank you. Thanks for bringing this to our attention.
Hey, guys.
All right. Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak in the public speaking portion of the meeting? No? Okay. Onwards. So our first delegation, again, 8A, can't come today, the Community Energy Association. So now we are on to item 8B, the Kootenai Art Therapy Institute. I see Monica there, and I don't know if who's stepping forward. Ah, there we go.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Terence Buey. I'm here representing the Art Therapy Institute, With me in our delegation is Monica Carpendale, who's the executive director, and Ralph Friesen, who's the chair of the board of the Kootenai Art Therapy Association. So I'd just like to begin by saying thank you to your acting worship, your worship, and all the councillors for having us here today. It's very much appreciated. And just to clarify, I understand we have 10 minutes, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I didn't want to. So I'm here because I'm acting as an advisor to the board on a pro bono basis for their application to the Kootenai Art Therapy Institute is applying for accreditation for a master's degree through the Ministry of Advanced Education. And I believe you have the papers, the copy of the, you do. And I can go through this as well. I'll go through this briefly, the presentation that we have. And then Monica and Ralph and I will be available to answer any of your questions.
Great.
So thank you. Thanks. So the Art Therapy Institute has been here in Nelson for 23 years. It's a non-profit and a registered charity. It started in 1995 and it now has 28 students who come from this year, this cohort, and they come from all over the world. The program is given in two ways. It's given as a campus program where people come and live here in Nelson, and it's also a blended distance, what's called a blended distance program, where people come here for periods of time through the year, short periods from across the country, from around the world, and they do the studies online as well. It's a 2-year program, and its diploma is awarded at the end of the 2 years. And it's essentially, it's equivalent to a master's degree. To come into the program, you have to have a first degree or a baccalaureate, post-baccalaureate equivalent. One of the key things about the program I just want to mention here is that the program has been very responsive to local community needs, as I think some of you are quite aware. There are clinical placements in all of the places that are listed here. Rosemont Elementary, the local schools, in the seniors facilities, in special education, the clubhouse, Daily Bread, and so on. Also, there's inpatient psychiatric programs where there are placements, and there are ongoing groups within Katy itself for the local community. So, in essence, really, what we're doing here is that it's a big issue for graduates that they have a diploma and not a master's degree, as you can imagine. And so the Institute is started the process. We've been preparing ourselves to apply to the Ministry of Education to get accreditation. And it's quite an involved process. It's very bureaucratic. There's a lot of, there are basically several parts to this, and I'll just touch on these. The first part is making an application with a complete description of the program to show that it meets the master's degree. And the second part of it is an in-depth look at the organization itself, at the Institute. And there's, to do this, we're going through every part of the program and every part of the organization and making sure that the Institute is operating at the best practices level for a college in British Columbia, essentially. So we're essentially going and saying we have everything in place here to be able to be accredited with a master's degree. Just as by way of kind of context here, over 80% of the funding for the Art Therapy Institute comes from tuition. And by way of comparison, at Selkirk, about 80% of the money for Selkirk, the funding comes from public funds. So it's sort of the reverse there. One of the reasons, and this I don't know if you can see this. Yeah, it's up. So where we are right now is that we're finishing the preparation of the documents for the application, the two main documents. We need to, the cost of this application is $3,500 to begin the application, and then another $6,000, these are fees paid directly to the ministry, another $6,000 to have external experts who the ministry appoints come in to review the program and the organization. We are planning to put our application in at the end of April. And in order to do this, not only do we have to, and here's the budget, not only do we have to prepare all the materials, but we also really need to have external consultants for two main pieces. We found a consultant who has taken 5 organizations through this already, who's willing to review our materials. And the other part is that we need to bring all of the procedures and the policies and procedures, the student handbook, the employee handbook, everything has to be brought up to scratch. So we're doing an internal process right now, but we will need to have some outside HR help with that. So the reason why, to sort of go back to the beginning of this, the reason why we're here is we really would like the city's support for this application. We are applying to the Community Initiatives Project through CBT, and we will be putting the application in this month. This is what the budget is. It's going to cost us about $17,500. I also want to acknowledge today Director Newell, who's here in the audience, Tom Newell from the Regional District. He was the first person to come forward and support us financially and spiritually in every way for the application. We also have some support from Director Faust from the Regional District. They both pledged $1,000 to us. Nice. So we're hoping that the city can be really strongly behind this on our application and help us to be able to make the application and go forward. That's it.
Oh, thank you, Terence. Are there any questions or comments from council? Go ahead, Mayor.
I've been familiar with the work of this school for a long time, and I know people who have benefited greatly, not only in being students at the school, but also in people who are receiving services now. And I'm in full support of supporting an application for funding. I think it's a wonderful thing that you're here, and you've accomplished an amazing thing since 1995. To be an accredited school is something to celebrate. So I'm behind this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
And I'd like to refer that to that we refer
What I'm
to.
hearing is they're applying for a CIP grant, so that will come forward as part of all the other CIP grants.
Oh,
So
okay.
you'll consider it at that time.
Were you applying for funding outside of that, or were you?
That's what I was.
No, we have the funds from Regional District, and we're hoping that we will get the rest of the money through the CIP.
Oh, I see. Oh,
Certain. Okay.
And are you applying for the larger region with that CIP grant?
I'm sorry, for the...
Are you applying for the larger Nelson region with the CIP grant?
We're just applying for the CIP grant through Nelson, through the City Council, not the regional districts, no.
Okay, because you can do that.
I understand, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And again, certainly our post-secondary institutions are jewels in Nelson's crown. And, what you are doing at your school is precious and important. So, yeah, we wish you the best of luck in your endeavors.
That's all right. And I just want to say how, it will be a big feather in Nelson's cap for this to happen, I think, for us to get, even Selkirk doesn't grant degrees. And if Katie gets to do this, it'll be wonderful for us. And the reason why I'm doing it is just that I've been deeply inspired to see what happens to these young people who go through this program and how they go back to reserves, they go back to their communities all across Canada and make a real difference in people's lives.
Thank you. Thanks. Did you have anything to add, Monica?
One of the other pieces there that Terence had on the PowerPoint there is our commitment around meeting the calls for action for the Truth and Reconciliation, and that we have been working for the last 3-4 years on what we call the Groundwater Initiative to support indigenized approaches to arts therapy education. And in our stats around the number of graduates that have graduated with Indigenous background, we are way above the national average of, up to 15 to 20% of them are Indigenous background that are completing the whole background and going out and working in communities and back on reserves. So we're really proud of this initiative and trying to keep moving it forward. Yeah.
Such important work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thanks.
I think that's everything, unless there are other questions or comments. No? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right. So next on our docket, we have item 8C, Social Planning Action Network Funding Presentation. I see Rona Park coming forward. And George Chandler, welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting us. My name is George Chandler. I'm the chair of the board of SPAN, and I live in Nelson. You don't need my address, do you?
I'm Rona Park. I'm the executive director at Nelson Community Services and also a member of the SPAN board. I'm the treasurer.
So thank you. I can call you acting worship. I know it makes you feel good, so I'll do that today. And your worship and council and staff. I know all of you councilors, many councilors currently are or have been city council reps to SPAN, so I know you know about SPAN. But we want to, I guess, give you a little update and make a request. You know, in looking at the work that's part of our strategic plan, the board recently looked at who we are and started asking the question, why does SPAN exist? What is the reason for us to be, and why should anybody care? And why should you care, by extension, the city council? And we had to answer that question. It wasn't hard to answer, but it was important to answer why we exist. Oh,
No, just press the down arrow.
the down arrow. Thank you. Now I've gone.
Really big.
Can I just say I'm a Mac person?
There we go. So just this down
Okay,
arrow here.
thanks very much. So our feeling is that SPAN didn't exist, and SPAN stands for Social Planning Action Network in Nelson. If we did not exist, there would be a strong reason why an organization, an entity like SPAN should exist. And that is it's a lens on community development and community planning that takes into account quality of life and well-being of citizens. And that is a social planning reason for existing all across Canada and probably all across the world. I did it again, didn't I?
Escape key.
Thank you. Escape, I like that.
Down arrow key.
Down arrow, thank you. So, I mean, the reason why we have that lens is to accomplish two things, really. And, I mean, Nelson is a wonderful place, and having those kids come in and sing for us is just a reminder of how important kids and health and families and well-being are to our community. But we can be even more caring, more just, more healthy, and that's part of what SPAN is about. But also we want to provide an equal voice for people in identifying problems and challenges and also being part of the solutions. So that really is the why of SPAN Nelson. But, you know, because the word social is in social planning, we're often misunderstood. I think many people, you know, certainly when you look at a social justice or human rights perspective on community development, it's natural to pay more attention to the most vulnerable. It's a good thing. It's important for us to do that. But it's important to remember two things. One is SPAN Nelson is not a social service body. The social sector is represented on SPAN, but it isn't a social service body. And neither is it a social sector only initiative. SPAN is and attempts to be even more social planning action network that includes all aspects of life in Nelson. So we've listed a bunch here. I bet we could come up with more. Obviously the obvious ones, maybe not so obvious ones, others, but they're all important. But what is really important from our perspective is their interconnectedness, because this is when we start understanding problems and understanding our way through problems to solutions. How do we operate? Well, really, the key things are collaboration and trying to provide as many voices, opportunity for voices as we can. I'm not going to read all this out because you've got it in front of you. But those are the key things: collaboration and striving for community participation, especially among voices that don't often either have a chance to express themselves or voices that don't often talk to each other. And that's part of our mandate. And that's where the subtitle comes in: community participation and planning positive change. What does SPAN do? Well, we do basically four things. We identify quality of life issues in Nelson. We provide research and information about those topics. We help engage and educate the public, especially around the areas of interconnectedness, because that often gets missed out. And we are a catalyst to make recommendations to other community groups, the community itself, governments, municipal, provincial, and so on. So those are our 4 tasks. And now, we've been around for 12 years, and Rona's going to give you a whirlwind tour of our successes.
All right. Right. Well, thank you. Yes, we have been around for a while, and we are a fully incorporated nonprofit society in BC, which we did soon after our initiation in 2006. And we've been kind of focused on a number of key areas from our inception. One that you'll all be familiar with is our, yeah, I do. Yeah, thanks. Our commitment to I've reorganized these a little bit. All candidates forums. You know, during the municipal, provincial, and federal elections, we've done our bit for community civic engagement and democracy, and held all candidates forums so that we could try to bring as many people together as possible around the issues. And we think we've done a good job. We're going to continue to tweak our process to make it a meaningful meaningful forums in the future. And the other thing we've done several times over the years is community surveys, asking people. We've done it in a number of ways. One is bringing people together in a forum, feeding them some food, and asking what are the top issues on your mind that is impacting the quality of life in Nelson. And we've gotten back often some resounding themes like poverty, affordable housing, absence of affordable childcare, mental health and substance issues and insufficient responses to that. And we have always tried to keep ourselves out there in asking the public and around their opinions on impacts of things impacting the quality of life. And those surveys, our intention behind doing the surveys was to find a way for us to then address those issues that come up. And so, again, like so many things, we're not trying to duplicate services, but we're trying to find a path that no one else is walking. And so our most recent survey in 2012, we noted that poverty reduction, or reducing poverty, was at the top of that list. And that was our commitment then for the subsequent years, which is probably our biggest project, and right now, which is Nelson at its best, our Ending Poverty initiative. In addition to that, we've done community mapping projects. We've held affordable housing forums, which actually led to the current Nelson Housing Committee that you now have as a committee of council, but it came out of SPAN's work in bringing the community together around this issue. Also in 2017, we focused on another gap in community, which was brought to our attention, which was the lack of untapped social capital, volunteerism, and how could we be more coordinated at that in our community. So right now we have conducted a feasibility study, and it looks very favorable for the community to move forward with that. We're now seeking partnerships and what do you call it? People who want to form an umbrella organization around a volunteer hub, and we think it's very close to takeoff. We need to secure some implementation funding, but we had great results from the survey, and which told us that there's a lot of commitment and there'd be a lot of use of such a hub. So, and I think. Yeah, those are, we've done a lot of other smaller initiatives over the years, like hosting Paul Bourne. Some of you probably attended, around collective impact, and over 100 people were at the Prestige, where we all, got our heads around that concept. But these are the kinds of things that SPAN does and has done. And we're also always listening to our membership, who meets with us roughly every month, to listen to what are issues that are emerging. And we'll talk more about that as we go through here. But those are just some of the highlights of things we've done in the past.
So we are here to make a request, a proposal. We're asking for City Council to create a stronger commitment to the important work of this Community Quality of Life Network by making SPAN a part of the Nelson City budget on an ongoing basis. Or are we intending to ask? I don't know how the process works. Kevin, you can let me know if we're out of line here. But that's what we're doing. So, we do get money. We did get money for the feasibility study around the volunteer hub. We've gotten money for Nelson at its best, and we have, it's not really official yet, is it? We're hopeful for some money for ongoing projects of Nelson at its best, which, if successful, you will be hearing about them. Some of you already know about them to some extent. But we often, to continue our public engagement and research work, we often don't get the funding that's basic infrastructure, and that's what we're lacking. It's really a volunteer-driven organization. So in order to expand and strengthen our community sector participation, in order to keep identifying community needs, including emerging issues, and in order to consolidate activities to respond to these needs, we are requesting some financial support from the city. Some emerging issues, we just played around with a few. You can imagine there's a lot of discussion these days about the impacts of minimum wage. There's some myths, there's some facts, there's all sorts of information out there, but this is obviously going to affect a lot of people. Transportation is an ongoing issue, not just for seniors, but for many other people in terms of gaining employment and housing and so on. As we diversify, Nelson has diversified a great deal in the 15 years that I've been here, and we also know that there's a rise in discrimination. We could even add issues like the effects of automation and guaranteed annual income, as in the next 10 years we're going to see incredible changes in the workforce. So these are issues, and with these issues, we ask ourselves, what would a solution look like if it was multi-sectoral versus if it was just one sector trying to solve poverty, for example, where we have in Nelson, according to the latest stats, 20% of people are living below the poverty line. What single sector, social or business or government, can solve that problem on their own? Well, it's impossible. A multi-sectoral approach is what helps us to both identify and provide some guidance around these issues. The prize for the city, the benefits, we feel, there are 4 of them. I'll just go over them briefly. One is, SPAN is to be part of a dedicated and active and strong multi-sectoral public entity that keeps an active eye on the community's quality of life. This can help the city. We have experience and expertise and networks to do responsive public engagement, to create dialogue around issues. We've shown that in the past, and we are always looking at the new issues. We think this would be a complementary third leg of a balanced stool. Right now, city provides funding to the cultural and arts sector and to the economic sector through NADP. So we're asking to be part of that. Social planning, being a multi-sectoral entity, would be useful to the city. And what we do supports the 2040, path to 2040. This is essentially a rounded off budget that we're looking at, around $15,000 to do the coordination work of that public engagement and research work that we spoke of. Mm-hmm. So just in closing, again, the reason why SPAN exists, it's around making, like the title of our poverty reduction, making Nelson at its best, helping us be an even better community, and to include as many people as possible in making that a reality. Questions?
Thank you, George and Rona. Any questions or comments from council?
I'm just curious, what do you mean by convening costs in your budget? You had coordination and something else.
That would be that idea of bringing people together. Sometimes it's renting a space and providing tea and coffee and that kind of thing. Just the kind of convening the public voice, public engagement.
Right, and sometimes we've noticed that to bring certain voices to the table, they require support, whether it's childcare or food or transportation. Yeah. So these are real costs that I didn't think about today when I was coming down here, but some people definitely have to think about to come to a meeting.
And I think the other thing that needs to be said too, we're talking about just this for a very small sort of central coordination of things. It doesn't preclude SPAN from continuing to pursue grant funding for projects, right? This isn't about projects per se.
So you're looking at operational funding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that this research function and the convening function to gather public input can be maintained. Yeah.
And are there ways to leverage that funding if you did get some? Are there bodies you can apply to for further operational funding if you had municipal support?
it's tough when you don't have a project attached to it.
Right.
Always on all projects, we do indicate an administration fee that, comes into SPAN to help us keep our websites going and things like that. But when the project's over, then the administration fees are over too. So I don't know. It's tough to get operational funding from funders that are really about projects.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Thanks. I appreciate the work of SPAN, and I appreciate the work of all of our social service agencies. It's important work. My question is around, so at this time, how many social service agencies are part of SPAN at this time?
Well, it's not just social service
Yeah,
agencies.
it's not- it's
That's
not
one of
So
the,
how many different groups, then, I'll rephrase that, how many different groups are involved in
Sectors.
SPAN? Sectors in
Yeah.
SPAN.
We've had them all over time. We've had police at the table quite regularly at one point, not so much lately. We've had the business community there and still do. We've health, education, social services, and local government for sure. Library comes, yeah. I mean, we have monthly or every 2-month meetings, and we usually have representation from all those sectors. Not huge, and people often come, the arts and culture are there too. They often come when they know that SPAN is focused on something that might have a direct interest to them. And, one of the projects we did over the years in 2008 was called Boom. I don't know if anyone remembers that. That was a collaboration between SPAN and the arts and culture sector and Selkirk College to try to blend the work that we do. And actually since then, there's been some really interesting installations at the museum that are about, poverty and art, and Anna did a project in poverty and art. So, I think it's that cross-sectoral synergy has really helped to create some pretty innovative work on some of the issues. But we're all there, all sectors, to answer your question.
And there is also a cooperative, a social service cooperative that was regional in nature. Are you connected to them as well?
SPAN isn't, no.
Not at all. You don't cross-pollinate with ideas because some of the issues they're dealing with are the same?
Well, although they're a regional, SPAN is totally Nelson-centric, right? We only deal with Nelson quality of life issues, SPAN does. It's hard to see me and not connect me to social services, right? And SPAN being social services, but it's not really about that.
and I have zero background in social service. I come from a human rights public education background, and that's one of the challenges we are finding. People do tend to pigeonhole us as social services.
Yeah.
And social planning is a multi-sectoral lens to include and look at social planning through various eyes. And we've had some success, especially through Nelson Ed's Best, but also SPAN, working with the business community. We see some inroads among business owners to be part of overall development in Nelson, and we think it is a good time for us to have some energy to invigorate and strengthen our multi-sectoral sector, because it still is, maybe not surprisingly, the idea is that we are a social service or social sector driven only entity, but that's not the truth. So part of that is our own lack of communication in Nelson, but it's also a lack of resources to be
So
able to
please
carry on
expand
the vision.
again on more than social service sector. What other sectors do you represent? You were saying you represent business and arts and
Economic.
but isn't the focus? So I'm losing my focus here. So isn't the focus mostly around improving the social aspect for people? You're looking at improving business as well.
Quality of life is across the board. Certainly social assistance and the very good work that Nelson Cares and Nelson Community Services and Anchors and other groups do, these are all really important. But SPAN wants to bring that voice to the table, but also with other voices, the economic, tourism, culture, arts, recreation, social, public safety. All of these voices looking at a problem have a better chance of identifying the problem, tapping the resources in the community, and moving towards a solution. So
I understand.
We want to do an even better job of invigorating that multi-sectorality.
So when you look at various projects that SPAN is doing, for example, so let's take Boom, for example. So that was a project with Selkirk College. Who was the lead person in pulling that project together? Was it someone from Selkirk College?
I don't know, actually. actually.
Okay.
Wasn't there then.
Or for example, I think, which is great, like I think that to pass around leadership too when it's someone in someone's expertise, like for example, if you partnered with the Chamber of Commerce, would someone from the Chamber of Commerce lead that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
Okay.
that's absolutely right. When it comes to tackling an issue, actually addressing it, it could be anybody who's
at the
part
table.
of that. Yeah.
Okay.
It's probably better to view SPAN as a community development organization. Like Columbia Basin Trust is a regional development organization. SPAN is a community development organization.
Okay.
That-
So
and
there's many partners.
many partners, yeah.
And many
we
potential
want
partners.
more. Yeah. That's really part of the challenge in getting more people to the table is that we just don't have any paid staff to keep nurturing those relationships, right?
Okay.
And we feel like there's a lot of lost initiative out there because of that, where we could really be partnering a lot more. And it's only because of our grants that Nelson at its best has achieved is where we've been able to, you know, afford to bring sectors together. And you can see the results of Nelson at its best. This isn't a presentation about it, but it's done amazing things and will continue to, right? And we have everybody, we have a steering committee of 12 that represents the whole community. So
So I was encouraged by the remarks of our provincial government, especially Shane Simpson, in terms of dealing with social issues and issues around human rights and poverty. And I know that this government is coming forward, this provincial government is coming forward with more funding to prop up a lot of the services that are needed in communities. And I think it's a fantastic thing. It's been long needed. And I think they're showing great leadership. So we'll be in discussion with them soon as well, and I will definitely talk about SPAN with them as well.
that'd be great.
Yeah, and see what they have to say about community organizations like this one, and about how they see that helping to push forward on issues of human rights and poverty and economic development for people or education, people who are needing assistance to do those things. Because I see those really as provincial government roles. Then they've been lacking for a long time. So it's nice to see that turning around a bit. Thanks for the information.
Would anybody like to make a motion to staff?
I would refer it to staff for discussion in our next budget.
All right. Do I need a seconder for that? Have a seconder? Seconded by Bob Adams. All in favor? All right, that carries.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and
Yeah,
attention.
thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
So next on our agenda is Nelson at its best.
I'm going to actually change seats here.
Wait a minute, you look familiar. Councillor Warmington. And the good doctor.
Yes, I'll introduce Dr. Lee McKay, who's the physician lead at the Kootenai Boundary Division of Family Practice and the co-chair of the Collective Services Committee.
Collaborative, but pretty close.
Okay, and I'm obviously a Nelson City Councillor, but I also do some contract work for Nelson at its best, and our presenter is not here today, so I'm going to do the presentation. So, as you heard from SPAN, Nelson at its best is a project of SPAN, but this project is specifically focused on poverty, and our mandate is to engage all of community in advocating and taking direct action to end poverty in Nelson. How do I do this? Okay. Are you seeing this?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You're seeing
I
this
see
one,
the-
not yours.
The gallery.
It's just
Yeah,
not there.
whatever's on your screen, that's what we're seeing on our presentation.
But the gallery can't see.
Galleries can see much better beside you.
Okay, don't see that, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to give you a brief update on what poverty looks like in Nelson. And so in 2015, 19.3, or 2015, 19.3, compared to 15.5% of Nelson, or BC residents overall. And that has risen. It's now about 19.8%. Most of those people living in poverty are working adults between ages 18 to 64 years, or about 1,200 of our residents are basically working poor adults. Child poverty in Nelson rose from 21.6 to 24.1 in the last few years. And the rate for BC overall is 18.5, so we're really high on the child poverty. And those numbers are actually 475 children under 17 years of age are living in poverty, and 140 of those are under the age of 5. So that's pretty serious. Our seniors' poverty rate has remained fairly steady, although we've got more individuals living in poverty. The demographic has grown overall as well. So we have about 290 seniors living in poverty. And when I'm talking about poverty here, I'm really talking at about $15,000 a year. So we're talking fairly extreme poverty. And that's because that is our, it's half of the after-tax median, which is the low-income measure. Half of the median income for the city. But, you know, there's been some attention to the issue of poverty, both from the federal government. Last year, we had a roundtable here in Nelson on poverty, where the community came out in good numbers and gave some great ideas and thoughts on poverty to the federal government. And just last week, we had the BC Ministry of Poverty and Social Development Community Roundtable, where again, we had a fairly decent turnout and some excellent feedback on the issue. So really what both levels of government were looking for are, you know, what are the impacts and consequences of poverty? What can we do to reduce poverty? And then they're looking for what priority actions they should be taking. And so from Nelson at its best perspective, although in these meetings we get right down to, you know, transportation or food or whatever specific issues, you know, if you're looking at it kind of at a high level, we really want to empower people to be able to participate in community, to have enough money to go out for a coffee or to put their kids in hockey or whatever it is, but to really have the capacity to participate meaningfully in the community. And we think that policies need to narrow the gap between the richest and the poorest amongst us in community. And finally, that will require disrupting some of the systemic drivers of poverty and economic inequality, and whether that's tax reform or something else. But at a high level, those are sort of what we're aiming for. And one way that we feel is a really offering great potential to reduce poverty is the universal guaranteed income, which is back in the news, because it really is about putting money in the hands of people who need it and having them use it accordingly, rather than putting it in the hands of people who already have what they need and hoping it trickles down. So it is kind of a different approach, and one that we are really interested in. So many of you will remember that some years ago, Manitoba had an experiment with a guaranteed basic income, which at the time got a lot of bad press. It was expensive, it didn't work, people stopped working. But actually, as that data has been pulled out and reconsidered and relooked at, in fact, it actually is proving to be a much more positive project than was initially reported. In fact, the people that did stop working stayed home with their children or went back to school, that the vast majority of people continued to work, but that the social benefits, as you can see here, were great, and it really did eliminate poverty for those who were taking part. So a little while ago, in 2015, Kingston came out as the first municipality in Canada to call specifically for guaranteed income as an approach to poverty reduction. And then in 2017, the Ontario government actually began to move on this. So this spring, Ontario will be introducing guaranteed income. It's about $17,000 for a single person over the course of the year. And they're clawing back half of what people earn on top of that. So there's incentive to get back to work, but at the same time, people are assured that they're going to have the basic minimal requirements for a healthy life. Quebec followed suit, announcing at the end of last year that they were going to offer guaranteed income. Now theirs is different again. It's targeted really at people who are unable to work. So there's lots of different ways of doing it. Really excited to see that in the document that's governing how the Greens and the NDP will govern together, that they have promised to roll out a guaranteed basic income pilot study. sometime in 2018. So really looking forward to that. They didn't give any indication of what that might look like, and I think we're a little early to talk about what it might look like. But we really, Nelson at its best, really strongly support this type of policy initiative. We think it holds huge potential for reducing poverty in our community, and we would like to be a pilot community. Not only do we have a very high rate of poverty compared to both the province and the federal situation, but our cost of living is very high, and the figures you see here are from 2015, and it was just before a very sharp increase in the cost of housing and food, so we know that we're much, much more expensive, and according to this calculation, a family of four would need about $65,000 a year to remain out of poverty here in Nelson, and that's in 2015. So what we are proposing is a council resolution, and there's only 4 whereases here, and this is the Kingston one, has about 20 whereases, so there's lots of really good reasons. And then there's another one here from the Canadian Medical Association, and they have about 30 whereases, so I'll leave these here for you to have a look at. But we have 4. You know, we really focus on the child poverty rate in Nelson as being something that seriously needs addressing, and the inequality issue, which obviously guaranteed income would help reduce the gap between rich and poor. So the proposal we're saying is that Nelson City Council resolves its support for the Government of British Columbia's intent to pilot one or several guaranteed basic income approaches to reduce and prevent poverty in BC, and calls on the government to include the City of Nelson as the subject of any such guaranteed basic income pilot study. So not only are we just indicating our support, you know, for the concept in general for the province of BC, but really stressing the fact that Nelson in particular would be a worthy recipient of such a study. And I'll turn it over now to Dr. McKay, because he'll tell you a little bit more about what we might be able to do.
Yeah, it's certainly an honor to propose that this be considered for Nelson here before you all. I would just speak as both a representative of the provincial working group on the social determinants of health, which poverty includes through the BC College of Family Physicians, as well as the chair of the Kootenay Boundary Division of Family Practice, Social Determinant of Health Working Group. And on behalf of the Nelson medical staff, when I brought this up, that it was an area that I was discussing with Nelson at its best, it was round vocal support from the entire room about this concept. And at the committee level, everyone said, give me a piece of paper and I will sign my name to it to say that we wholly support this. And somebody that spent most of my working career focused on the social determinants of health and the impact on health, and that knows the MinCom study and Evelyn Forget's work bringing that back to life, which showed about a 9% reduction in healthcare utilization, largely in traumatic injuries and mental health, which is a major challenge that we have here. The possibility that this proposal, if the province does go forward with it, could have to impact our community is just unbelievable. And I think I just wanted to position that the executive of the Kootenay Boundary Division of Family Practice and the board decided that we would support any of our communities as much as we could if one of them was selected to go forward with being one of the pilot locations. And we are currently really considered to be one of the divisions within the province that is the most armed in terms of data analysis and being able to do data extraction about the impact of some of our policies. We've been very involved with a number of new pilots going on in the boundary in terms of transforming our primary healthcare system, and have been really able to get to some core data that would be really meaningful to be able to show the impact that we do if Nelson is selected as a pilot for this. So just wanted to let council know that we are probably some of the best prepared in the province, and very, very strong supporters of this motion, both from the Nelson Medical or Kootenay Lake Medical staff, as well as from the Kootenay Boundary Division of Family Practice. And I also brought the Canadian Medical Association's resolution. It is a lot of whereases, but just to see all the support all the way up to our national body that really supports this as a different approach. And I just, on a personal level, as a Nelsonite born and raised, when I look at my community and I see a daily impact in my office of poverty and the negative health impacts, but I also see the incredible entrepreneurial and artistic spirit that our community has. And I really think if we can unleash the shackles of constantly applying for underemployment, constantly applying for unsuitable employment, that it's the current basic of our system, and actually allow a little bit more innovation, that we could see tremendous strides in our poverty rates here, our health indices, our mental health, and our overall quality of life in our community. So I really do hope that council will strongly consider approving this motion and moving forward strongly with our hands up for being a pilot location.
Thank you. I know, I mean, as you know, Councillor Warmington, at UBCM this past year, the City of Nelson strongly, enthusiastically advocated for the City of Nelson to be included in any pilot that went forward from the government. We heard that we, certainly weren't the only people advocating for their community, but it's the work of the Division of Family Practices and all the data that you're talking about. I'm wondering if we can put something together this year for UBCM to maybe strengthen our case when we speak to the ministers again around the benefit of using our community and the ability to really, the mechanisms we already have in place for studying those impacts. It seems like a good fit. And Mayor, you had your hand up.
Thank you. I would move that we refer this to council for consideration, to remove this recommendation to, we can't pass it here, it's a committee of the whole, or can't discuss it here, I should say, or make a motion on, but to refer it to our next meeting, regular meeting, and
Is there a seconder?
Finish that question. Does this have to go through the AKVOG?
No. Are you seconding?
It's seconded by Councillor Adams. Okay. All in favor? All right, that passes unanimously. I'm wondering, with this resolution, what's the, we can resolve that we would like the province to do this. Is there an idea of where it goes from there that you have?
Well, I would suggest that we would send a copy of the resolution to Minister Simpson and CC it to relevant ministries, other relevant ministries.
And our MLA.
And our MLA. Go ahead.
I'd also like to say that I met with Parliamentary Secretary Mabel Elmore. She was here to attend Nelson at its best event, and she's touring the province right now, just for those people who weren't at that meeting. And we were lucky enough, she wasn't so sure of her transportation schedule, and she was traveling from Cranbrook, and she was able to meet with me before she went to the public event. And I was really encouraged by what she had to say. She was attentive to the needs of Nelson. She was attentive to the province, but especially interested in the work of the organizations here in identifying and really articulating issues around poverty and how we can address them. So I spoke strongly in favor of if there was any pilot project, we would certainly be up for it. And although she doesn't make the final decision, I'm sure she heard that. So, I think we have a good chance.
I know that the Kootenays don't like too many whereases in their resolutions, but we might add one more whereas this area has the capacity to do some of the data analysis. I think would be a good thing to do.
It's a selling point for sure. Well, thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Thank you. All right, next. Oh my goodness.
Catastrophe.
All right.
There's a napkin right there too.
Oh, here's
That's handy.
Kleenexes.
You want a couple pieces of tissue?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Anna.
You need a paper towel.
Yeah, let me get up there and perform.
Here?
That's a good idea.
Good thing your iPad wasn't under that.
Ah, it is a good thing.
Good thing.
Okay, where are
I
we at?
spilt it in that
Okay.
direction.
So we are at item 8E, street outreach project update.
The party.
The Downtown Nelson Street Outreach Project began in 2016. I see Rona Park coming forward again. Here we go. Yeah, right. Hi.
I've asked Ryle Giuliano, he's one of our street outreach workers, to attend with me. Linda DeChef, who's the project evaluator, has a child's homesick today and not able to be here with you.
Too bad.
So I'll do my best to lead you through this. Now, we don't have a PowerPoint with this one, do we, Francis? Yeah. So all of you would have this one, though, in your package. Is that right? The evaluation report?
We don't.
There was a draft document
Yeah.
that went, yes, that went sent as, that was attached. It's not in your agenda package because it was asked not to be included on the agenda package, but went as an email attachment when you were notified of the meeting.
Oh, I didn't see it. Okay. thank
Oh, so it's not been read necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Okay. All right.
That's okay.
Well, it's a long report, but let me just begin by
Some highlights.
I'll launch in. So, as you know, in September of 2016, we launched the Street Outreach project as one of the projects of the larger Street Culture Collaborative, and we agreed then to pilot that initiative and to gather the data and evaluate how well we met the objectives of that, and to see whether or not our objectives were actually even on track. And so we've done that. As many pilot projects go, you get too close to the end and you see that things are looking positive. So we actually carried on. We continued to raise funds for year 2, and so technically speaking, we're in year 1, but we're sharing with you the results of our first year of the project. So Ryle and Jeremy keep a lot of data, and we also, on your day-to-day interactions with the folks on the street. But in addition, from the beginning, our evaluation framework included gathering data from the emergency room at the hospital, from the police, and from local community service providers. We had also hoped that the ambulance would provide us with some data, but unfortunately, we weren't able to get that. They gather it in rather different sorts of ways, and it would have been fairly complicated to sort that through. The one thing I will say in this report, it is a draft right now because we received the NPD data fairly late in the game, and the full analysis of that hasn't occurred yet. So those highlights are yet to come, and that will be fine once you're reading it. Hopefully we'll have the final draft with those data collected. So there were 3 goals to this project. One was to impact the lives of actual people on the street, our street population, that we consider the street culture being those who live and thrive on the streets of Nelson to survive, right? And so it's a fairly broad definition, but that our idea was to impact that population, meet their short and long-term needs, and to encourage them to more healthy lifestyles, simply put. And our second goal was to wade through my own papers now. Was to look at the impact of or the awareness that the business community had of this population, their interaction with the population, the challenges that they were having, and to see if we could build some more common understanding, tolerance, acceptance, and so on of this reality of our community. And the third goal was to really look at the impact of the continuum of services in the community, thinking that maybe what's going on is that we just have big holes in our service continuum and that these folks are all falling through. And so the idea was to look at, well, how strong is that continuum, and just where have people have fallen in that. And we had some good feedback around all of those goals. Part of the evaluating was extensive surveys. So with the folks themselves on the street, we surveyed at least 30 people on whether or not they felt this program was having any impact for them. The second group we interviewed or surveyed was the business community. And what we chose to do there was a pre-test. So in October 2016, we had nursing students from the college ask them questions like, what's your relationship right now with the street culture? How do you feel about them? What do you know about them? All that sort of thing. And then we did a post-test a year later and got the difference in the data. And then on the third goal, we surveyed the community service providers, asking, has the presence of the street outreach team made any difference in how your service goes, that sort of thing, and what gaps still remain, in your opinion. So all of that data and all of the comments from those providers is here in this report. So I think to get to some of the highlights, though, because it will take forever, it's a very long report, I think you should know some key things. There were, in the course of a year, 287 unique individuals, different individuals were supported through street outreach. 201 were men, 81 were female, and 5 were transgendered or non-binary. So by far the majority being male, eh? And of course, we looked at their housing status, their income status, majority income being income assistance, or unknown, because you have to know as well in the gathering of this data that we tried the least intrusive approach to getting this data. And sometimes, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's sort of just, without getting too detailed, sort of, well, the guy looked about 30 to 40. Is that how you kind of judge age and that kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Yeah, and without asking, we just tried not to be really intrusive with, like we were conducting a research study rather than a service. So that was sort of the ages of the people, and then we looked at how much time was spent with people on the street, and it would range from 5 minutes, like, hi, how are you? Do you need anything today? To well over an hour when someone's committed to wanting service. So I think the majority, over 45%, actually was just a 5-minute interaction, letting people know that we're here to help, you know how to contact us, that kind of thing. But then some who really wanted to engage, we were willing to spend much more time with. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Did you want to say something about that?
Something that I might add in there, and maybe many of you have heard this already, but that the majority of folks that we work with as well are from the Kootenay boundary area, from this region. Not so much sort of transient folks as what was sort of initially thought. Yeah, which I think is an important point. These are people who grew up in the area and have sort of been priced out or haven't been able to access services that they need, and so they're for the most part locals.
The team offered support in a whole variety of areas, from basic needs to food, accessing food, some of the other basics of life, a lot of getting them healthcare services that they needed, taking steps toward recovery, finding housing, and that sort of thing. So there's the whole gamut. And a lot of it was just the sitting and talking to someone, showing that you care. We called this project developing a more caring, coordinated response. Well, we threw the caring in there particularly because it wasn't just about pulling services together and being really technical about it. It was just trying to say we're a caring community. And if you don't want to access services and supports, you don't have to. It doesn't mean you're going to be rejected. If you just need someone to listen, we're here too. As you may know as well, our service model was to hire 2 part-time outreach workers, and we also in the first year engaged a part-time peer volunteer, Bernadette White, who didn't choose to continue with us in the second year, but it was an experiment. We learned that from other communities. They had tried that. It has some value. It has its pros and cons. After the year, we decided that we would just carry on with the 2 part-time, and we now engage volunteers to help us with some of the more social inclusion activities like toonie swims and soccer games and things like that.
And we have a practicum student right now,
Yes.
which is kind of exciting. Dakota, who's here with me today.
Right.
Hi.
Love having students with us too in the project. Yeah. So I wanted to get back to the piece about the business community for a moment. In 2016, the survey themes at the time were that they thought that these folks were responsible for a lot of detrimental behavior on Baker Street that led to decreased business and additional work for them as business owners. And another was that they had a lot of need for emotional, psychological, and physical supports that many business owners simply felt out of their depth to provide and didn't know what to do. There was a lot of NIMBYism, not in my backyard. These folks shouldn't be here, some of them said categorically, and others said, I'm just simply afraid of them, I don't want anything to do with them. Lots of them felt that there was a need for more education, that they weren't against them, but they just really didn't know how to handle this. So as you may recall, we did a whole round of mental health first aid training in the community, and several business owners sent staff. And some of them said, you know, we're just trying to run a business. Like, this is, like, somebody else needs to deal with this. It's cutting into our time, and we're way too busy to deal with these kinds of things. And they were impatient for change to happen. They wanted somebody to just deal with this issue. So, of course, the team spent a lot of time getting to know the businesses and dropping off their cards and talking to them whenever you had a chance to, and educating wherever possible. And it was interesting that in the 2017 then, when we went back to survey them, the businesses said that they felt like street outreach was a really important resource in the community, and that many of them had accessed that. And I think we have data on that, but there were a lot of calls from business community saying, we got this situation, come and help. They also said that more needs to be done. You know, they felt it was great, but you know, the problem's still there, and you know, we know that. We never did say that this project would solve the problem entirely, but they've noticed some changes. They think panhandling. Some of them, you know, still think panhandling should be illegal, and there should be bylaws about that. And some of them still think, you know, downtown's pretty sketchy and don't feel uncomfortable to be there. But they also said things like the street outreach team needs to promote itself more and make more and more people aware, including more businesses aware of them. So, yeah. I thought that was interesting, and I think that when we presented this draft to our Street Culture Collaborative Working Group a few weeks ago, it was pretty clear amongst the group that while we felt strongly that we met the goals in terms of impacting the individuals themselves, in fact, we were overwhelmed with the level of the numbers, the need, the ways in which we could impact them. We felt very confident that we had met those goals. We weren't as confident that we met the goals we had around impacting the business community, and felt that there was, one of the recommendations is to go forward with more work to promote street outreach with the business community, to do more destigmatizing and attitude shifting work, i.e. public education probably, and other innovative ways that we can meet and continue to meet with the business community to find out how they want to support the work we're trying to do. The impact on the continuum of services, it was interesting to get the surveys back from the service providers. Over 72% said that they felt that they were working much more collaboratively than ever before, both with each other and with street outreach, which was also really good to hear. That because of street outreach, it was kind of the glue now for all working together. And so that was a positive impact that we hadn't anticipated. One of our initiatives was to create a memorandum of understanding amongst all the service providers. We haven't gotten to that. The idea was that with an MOU with each other, we would be sort of ensuring that the whole service network was working together. So if I had someone or Raul had someone and he called over the Salvation Army, they would sort of drop everything and see that person right away so that, you know, things went smoothly. But it sounds like that organically happened almost anyway. I want to get to the data that we received from the emergency room hospital because I think you'll find this one interesting. Lots of calls. Both Ryle and Jeremy attended a lot of visits to the ER, either with or without police, I think, right? There's lots of times you went on your own. And the ER was good enough to provide us with data for the very same period of time the year prior. And so they've shown us what the data looked like in terms of the number of, the frequency of visits to the emergency department. And while there was, you know, 1 visit, 2 visits, 4 visits, and so on, where it got up to 10 plus visits by a unique individual, in the year prior, the total emergency room visits were, total number of unique patients was 4, and those 4 people ended up there 43 times. During the year that street outreach was in place, there were no one attended 10 or more times to the ER at all. And then if you go down in 5 to 9 visits, you know, the numbers were considerably lower, like went from the year before 75 visits down to 52 visits. And you see that all the way down as you watch this grid. So this is important information, and Councillor Daly was at our meeting and wanted this particularly pointed out as information council would probably want to use with health authority.
Yeah.
That this is fairly significant with the involvement of street outreach in bringing down ER visits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think police, we've also heard them talk about just how much it's taken them off. Like if Ryle or Jeremy, you're up there with the person and you can wait while they're being assessed. And then they are there to take them to the next steps, right? Whereas police would normally be attending those visits. So that was one of the significant outcomes there. And then we also have data from mental health and substance use. The year prior, they had 656 visits to to the ER. So those are specifically mental health related. And in the year street outreach operated, they had a drop down to 619. And more of them, so the key thing here is that there was a higher number and 13% were actually admitted to acute care, whereas in the year street outreach operated, there was a lower number of mental health patients who went to ER, and actually more were admitted. So the diagnosis was more tight. These guys identified what was up at the hospital, and right away they knew they needed to be conveyed, right? So it's just honing what's going on here, what's happening, and you can get services happening faster and get them the right kind of care they need.
Mm-hmm.
I think a big piece of that too is the advocacy piece and just understanding the proper channels where people need to go, so there isn't confusion when those steps need to happen. It's fairly streamlined.
Yep.
So I'm going to wrap it up with just our conclusions. I think there's lots to say that we really do feel that we met our goals and objectives. There was some recommendations though coming out of our working group, and those were that we look at expanding the hours of outreach if possible, so that we can ensure our team doesn't burn out, which is I think a great idea. It is tough work. As you may know, the new Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions has put in place a mobile unit that is there to, it's more than, it's not like a physical truck or anything, it's a mobile phone number and so on to really help first line responders with the trauma of doing this work every day. And so these are more and more of these kinds of supports are coming out. And, just so you know, we have clinical support for these guys. We have a team of all the outreach workers in town meet once every couple of months with a clinical supervisor to do case consultation and talk about their own work and how it's going. So expanding the hours potentially, it was suggested that We continue to gather input from all the stakeholders over time. It was suggested that we continue with more social inclusion activities, because once basic needs are met, then it's really about what else do you need, and how do you want to be part of community. So more recreational opportunities and more community education around street-related challenges, especially with the business community. And do more work on changing stigma toward marginalized populations, and recognizing that alone will take a long time. And it's also recommended that we continue with the street culture collaborative work on the other initiatives that it has proposed, like drop-in center, temporary work program, these kinds of things that will, again, begin to address further the needs of this population. And finally, that we continue to run this project for at least 3 years in total, so that we can get and track some good data on trends, need, demand, all of that sort of thing, and that we continue to fund the project through local community sources, including the RDCK, because many people come in from the other parts of the region. So continuing to fund it from local community resources as much as possible, so that we keep the community engagement in street outreach high. Yeah, those are the kinds of things that we're recommending around this project. So I'm going to end it there, because there's a lot of data. It is interesting, it's more interesting to probably read yourself. Linda's peppered it through with lots of quotes from the surveys that are very, reflective, I think, of people's feelings. Some of them, like most of them, are positive, some that aren't so positive. That's fine too, that's what an evaluation is. But overall, we feel very positive about the outcomes that our team is underway with. I'm open to your questions.
Thank you. Mayor?
First of all, I'd like to thank the team and Rona and the team of people that worked around getting this established and a successful year, a second year in operation. I know it's really difficult work. I know that it's not the easiest job in the world, but it certainly is appreciated, and just the stats are telling me and telling council that it is making a difference. I also think the sheer fact that Interior Health is now participating in the funding of this program shows its worth. When we began the first year, we didn't have any funding from Interior Health, and I think that them coming forward this year with funding is excellent. It's certainly, and the stats you provided around hospital visits were really telling. It's far, what we've always known, it's far more economical to deal with people and their needs outside of emergency services. Emergency services are not the best place, whether it's police or fire, and if you can just get decent medical care without using the emergency room all the time, it makes a huge difference. I have a question for Ryle. I was interested in learning more about, I know there's only a couple of you, and that's, the workload is pretty heavy. And considering you dealt with close to 300 people, and I would imagine you're counting, when are those stats counted? Are they year-round?
Yeah.
Now, year-round, it's a little less, but peak season is probably in the spring, summer, when the weather gets better? Like you're dealing with most people then?
Yeah.
I think the population of folks that we're dealing with definitely increases with warmer weather.
Yep. And so my question to you is, so if you are accompanying people to the hospital and spending time, what is the average time that you spend with an individual at the emergency room? And what does that mean in terms, because there's not a lot of you, in terms of support to each other and to other folks on the street? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so that depends kind of on what the situation looks like. One of the biggest differences for us has been this opening of the detox facility in Castlegar, which means that we don't have to push so hard for people to detox in hospital here. Those were very long wait times. I spend 5-6 hours with a client waiting on several occasions. But we always have our cell phone, and most of the people we work with are aware of that number and can call us, and we're still able sort of stay in touch that way, even if we're up at the hospital and if I need to leave, then I can for sure.
It's good to know that those other services are helping in this work. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's still some barriers there in the way that that's set up, but I won't get into that now. But it means that the hospital is able to move a lot of patients over there for that reason.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's great.
Councillor Warmington?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, there is a section in here on temporary work options, and I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your experience or what you know about the need.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that idea right now. But we started a committee a few months ago. It's been a while now. I know Councillor Daly was part of that committee, as well as the members of the Chamber of Commerce. And we started doing some planning, and I think that it sort of just nosedived somewhere and lost momentum. I'm interested in getting that going again and planning on reaching out to that group soon. I think that there's a very big need, especially for folks with disabilities, mental health issues, substance use issues, who aren't able to work full-time or work full-time jobs. And if you're able to provide an option where someone could work for 3 hours a day, twice a week, and someone could sort of just show up and be there and do that work, I think that that would really benefit a lot of people in the community. I think it would also reduce a fair amount of theft and give people that sense of belonging in the community rather than feeling pushed out and separated from it.
Thanks.
Councillor Cherbo?
Yeah, well, I'd like to thank you for the work you do, and I would say there's a bit less heat on council since this program started, which is always good. So is there some place, what do you do if you have somebody, can you take them to a restaurant and buy them a coffee, or is that how you kind of deal with it? If somebody's a bit out of whack?
It always depends, and going for coffee is definitely always an option. With most of the folks that we're working with, we know them pretty well by now, even though there are maybe near 300. It's been over a year now, so different people have different needs. Some people just need to go for a walk around the block. Some people need to be in a more serious situation, maybe connected with emergency response at mental health and substance use. Sometimes we need to call the police. But more often than not, it's people want someone to talk to and to sort of have that emotional release with in instances of crises. But yeah, it varies by occurrence.
Yeah, there's one fellow I know, he always asks me for $2 for a coffee, and I said, I'd like to know where you can get a coffee for $2.
Yeah, fair.
But I bought him a coffee a couple of times. Anyway, so thanks again for your hard work, and is there any possibility of recruiting more people to help?
Well, so that's something that we're sort of, I guess, starting to look at. We don't have a lot of capacity with 2 people who are sort of half-time. We have one volunteer right now who's running a program that we started, and we'll have more programs running in the summer. We're going to get street soccer going. And right now with a practicum student, if we take on too many more folks, then the sort of management part of the job becomes overwhelming, and then it's difficult to actually get out into the streets. So that's a balance that we're trying to work with, but I would love to see another person be able to take that position and spread some of that work out and spread some of those hours out. It's always also the dance between us wanting to be out in the morning to connect with clients, but lots of businesses asking us to be out later, and then looking at safety of being alone in those situations. Or it's complicated, but I think that we're doing fairly well with our resources right now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for council's support through all of this as well. So.
And I'll just add that our earlier request is still on your table, as you may recall. I came here last fall, I think, we're asking for $10,000 to support the project in 2018. So hopefully that's still in your budget hopper. We are counting on that as part of our mix for this year going forward. And it's true, we do have IHA support, although, you know, we're almost at the end of the fiscal year, and I've not heard about continuation of that. So.
Oh, well, we'll have to get on that.
Yeah, anything you can do to help would be great. You know, I hate to make any assumptions about that, but it did, they did make it clear to me that it may be that you have to apply again. And we did manage also to redirect some of our homeless outreach funding that we have through BC Housing into street outreach. So we've now added that to the role of the outreach workers to do housing support and with a bit of a rental supplement baggie to help people with too. So slightly changed the role this year by offering housing supports directly now. We still have our homelessness prevention programs, but these guys can now do a bit of that too. So.
Now, is that $10,000 in the budget hopper for this year? Can you remember? No. Do we need a recommendation to staff to have that conversation?
I would refer it for consideration at our next budget meeting.
Okay, is there a seconder?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Turbo. All in favor?
Can I just ask, have you considered applying for a CIP grant for that?
No.
What do you
No.
say?
I mean, we could, but, you know, generally speaking, those are small amounts of money.
No, the council's awarded many projects well over $10,000.
Yeah. Case in point, the station house,
Yeah, lots.
lots of things, yeah.
So, for like the $10,000 that I was asking before, you would prefer it come that way perhaps?
But if you ask for it through budget, then council has to balance that with taxation, right? And decide, you know, there's lots of requests for you know, increase in the budget. We just heard another one today. So that's the pool you're competing with then is not only that, but obviously all our core services and everything else. That's the pot you're competing with versus CIP, which is, you know, fully discretionary. There's nothing committed under CIP to any particular project or group. It's just a different pot you're competing with. So.
I think I have about 10 days to get that.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be overly complicated. You got a report, you got, you know, it's.
No, it's not that complicated.
Yeah.
All the stuff is there, yeah.
Just more work.
Just more work.
Yeah, I know, it's another application.
I would just like to say with this that, with your indulgence, we'd like to take draft off of it once we've got the police data in. In fact, maybe Sean's speaking to that today. I don't know. Are you, Sean? No. So, I mean, there's police data in here, but it's not analyzed in the way that we'd like it to be. So when that's completed, we'll send you the final copy then.
Thanks.
You can distribute it and so on.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you
a
for
lot.
your support in every way for the work we've been doing. We think it's pretty valuable and made a difference in our community.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just before you guys leave.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, so Chief Burker had asked me to come here today just to speak about the street outreach team. And so my name is Constable Sean Zakowski. I'm the beat officer since July of last year. So I don't have the stats that you're looking for. That wasn't provided to me. But I can say our relationship with Ryle and Jeremy, still in the infancy stages, obviously, but I think we've already broken down barriers and we've already got a very positive relationship where I've actually got the number in my personal cell phone if I need to access them, which takes the load off of us for calls we're not required for, and then vice versa. I get text messages from Jeremy saying, hey, can you help me out here? So nothing but positive things to say about the program so far and the relationship that we've had. Couple things I was going to suggest you guys already touched on would be if you could get more people for extra hours. Like Ryle hinted on it, yeah, you'd like to be there in the morning, but we know that the issues these people are having aren't an 8 to 5 problem. So that would be something that I would suggest as well. I just wanted to say that on behalf of the Service Department.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really are happy to have them there too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great day. Thanks for coming.
All right. Next on our list here, we have the Nelson Police Department about Nelson Street Outreach. And I don't know if Constable Zakowski, if that was your presentation or if you if you had more to say that you wanted to.
No, the chief just asked me to come, so just put in our thoughts. If there's any questions that council has, I can answer your questions.
Yeah, I think we're just.
Yeah, have a seat.
Yeah, I think we're just hoping that, you know, maybe give council a little bit of kind of how you're feeling about, since you've been on full-time as the
Yeah,
beat
give us an
officer,
update since you started
how you
as.
feel things are going.
Yeah, things are progressing well in relation to the street outreach team. Like I said, it's been nothing but a positive. I think at first there was probably some barriers there. Probably just saw the blue uniform to start and a little apprehensive to engage maybe. But I think once we got to know each other and they realized how I operated, then it was fine. There was no issues there. As for the beat position, positive feedback from the downtown business community. They said they've noticed a difference right away. We deal with the same clientele that street outreach are going to deal with, mental health are going to deal with. Probably know all of them by first name now. Know a lot of their stories, know where they're from. There are a lot that are local. We do attract people from other places all over Canada that come here. Work their way across Canada, they hear about how nice Nelson is and come, because they're right, Nelson is very nice. We're very lucky to live here. But anything that we've dealt with so far has been positive. We've been able to build relationships, not just with Nelson Mental Health, street outreach, but also the people that are having to live and survive on the street. I think we've got it to a point now where myself, I can have a conversation with a lot of these clients, the same that the outreach team can, and mental health workers will as well. So it's been positive so far. Same with the street outreach team. Our busier times for the downtown core is going to be spring through fall. Winter time, we still have a large number of people that remain here, live here. So we still do have those same clients around, accessing the services. But again, I think the police have done a good enough job where a lot of the people downtown can engage with us now and not just see the blue uniform. They know my first name. They refer to me as Sean, and we can have a conversation. We've had coffee. I purchase coffee for people. I purchase lunch for people. When you can tell, it's not an everyday occurrence, but it's, you know what, these guys are having a bad day, and they really appreciate that. I heard a girl the other day who's one of our regulars downtown. There was about 4 of them, and I was talking to them, and when I walked away, you could hear one guy that was kind of new to the group. Well, what did he want? And she was like, you should just be thankful he stopped and talked to us. Like, he's just talking to see how we're doing. So I think we've got a good relationship going down there. It's not perfect. I'd like to see less graffiti. Graffiti is very hard because you can't just nail one person to graffiti. It could be anybody.
Yeah.
And it just happens like that. So the business community, I'm working with the business community downtown. And a lot of them have my personal cell number to text and say, here's what's going on. Can you please come address this? But yeah, it's been a positive thing so far. This year I plan to get out on the mountain bike a little bit more. We've utilized it in the past. But last year it was my choice for a little bit not to. It was just too hot. 40 degrees wearing this stuff, riding the bike. Yeah, I'm not going to make it through the day. So
Need to get an electric bike.
True.
Okay, questions, Councillor Warmington?
I'm just wondering, aside from the street culture, what kind of issues are you dealing with downtown on the streets?
Downtown is the business community is complaining a lot about like the Liquor Act violations, right? So the drinking in public, smoking, the new smoking bylaw. People are happy the bylaw is there, and it's being enforced. And I'm still using it as an education process. A lot of people say, "Oh, we were unaware." Well, here's the new bylaw. So, but it's mostly like the drinking, the smoking of marijuana downtown. Sometimes it's the nuisance of gathering of people, where people feel they're blocking access to businesses. And that can be 1 or 2 people hanging out, enjoying the nice day, but then all of a sudden 4 or 5 more stop. And then the volume gets louder. Sometimes the language becomes inappropriate, and if you're a family or a mother or father trying to walk by with your child, people feel
Dogs?
that disturbing. Dogs are, I feel personally, the dogs have gotten better.
Good.
There still are some people that don't want to have their dog on a leash, and a couple dogs downtown are actually way better off a leash because they're right beside their owner. They've never needed a leash. But I think it's getting better, in my opinion. You still see some dogs tied up to a parking meter or something, and it doesn't take me standing there very long for somebody to come out. There's a problem with my dog? Well, now that you're here, please don't tie your dog to the parking meter. Right? It's too warm. Take your dog home. It's too hot.
Best one I saw was a guy with 2 dogs, and one dog was holding the other dog's leash.
But
Any
it's,
other-
yeah, we get everything downtown. If you look at our calls, and I know Chief Burkhardt has provided you guys with stats and everything, but if you look at it, a high percentage of our calls are in the downtown core. But I think you're going to find that wherever you go, because especially in Nelson, where you've got everything so centralized for shopping, entertainment, dining, it's all right there. And so I think that's why you're seeing an increase in calls. I think we were up 300 last year overall. And I think a lot of that is also proactive work. We've got more members, which allows you to get out there and be a proactive police officer instead of a reactive. And in my opinion, that helps out. It prevents some crime. It's not going to prevent all crime, but it does prevent. And it also lets you get out there and build the relationship with the people in the community, the business owners, the people who are on the street. So I think that's why you see the increase. There's a lot of on-view stuff, like, okay, I found this gentleman here who's had too much to drink. I'm going to start a file. Let's take care of that. And what you don't see is that, okay, well, that's taken care of. He's either gone home or spent the night with us. What you don't see is, well, down the road, that could have been a fight or something worse, right? So I think the proactive police in our downtown core is really beneficial.
So just to clarify, when you say there's been an increase in calls, that could be calls from other officers or other, like how would it?
That's our calls overall as a police department.
As a police department.
Yeah.
So somebody could be driving by in a car and call something and saying, can somebody check that out, or?
Somebody like our impaired driving stats have gone way up. And again, that's because you've got officers out there, the ability to go out and focus on doing that, where they're not tied up on a file. Or it's myself downtown, where I see something occurring. So it's not necessarily where the public is called. A lot of it can be what we call like an on-view file.
I see.
I'm downtown, I'm walking in the alleys, well, here's somebody passed out. Can you please start me a file, and let's deal with this gentleman. So-
I see, thank you. Councillor Cherbow, you had a question?
Yeah, I still see a number of people driving, talking on their cell phones.
Yeah.
I guess, is that part of it as well?
That would be more of it's our mandate as well, when we can get out there and do those patrols.
It's distracted driving, isn't it?
Distracted driving is the terminology, yep. And what we'll do is when we get chance, if we have time, people will go out and set up like a speed check. They'll go out and do operations looking for distracted drivers. I know the URSU unit does a lot of that work, and their numbers are way up, unfortunately.
Yeah, I
In
bet.
Vancouver, they had police officers riding on the buses.
Yep.
And then they radio a patrol car.
Yeah, one of our locations is the parkade. I didn't tell you that. We'll have somebody up and
Just
they can
live
look
stream
down
it.
on Vernon Street, right? And they can see the driver's got a cell phone right hand using it. So yeah, we do what we can.
That's interesting.
Wait till the warmer weather.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Councillor Warmington, did you have a question, or did I see her? Oh, okay. Anybody further questions or comments for the constable?
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Being here.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you very much.
And with no late items, can I get a resolution to adjourn? Councillor Warmington. All right. Thanks, everyone.
No, that was interesting. That's good. And we're-